Hello, dear viewers. Welcome back to Mid9M, your go-to channel for chilling tales that tingle your spine. If you're joining for the first time, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share it with your friends if you enjoy our content. Now, without further ado, let's dive into our story for today, a tale from the era of World War II. Imagine being a pilot, fighting in Dunkirk, embarking on a mission one eerie night in September 1940, only to have your plane fail and your narrative take a nightmarish turn. What if a beach you crash-landed on turned out to be completely out of this world? You'd encounter beings so grotesque, they'd be beyond your wildest dreams, or in this case, nightmares. Can you imagine running into an entity pulling you into a realm of darkness? Well, dear viewers, brace yourselves as we unfold this haunting narrative. Stay tuned, for this story is going to make you question reality, dreams, and pique your curiosity with its chilling conclusion. Warning, this is not for the faint-hearted. Let the story begin. 1940. It was the era of World War II. I was a pilot and had been in action in Squadron 78 in the RAF for about 3 years. I flew mostly Spitfires and I fought in Dunkirk. But something went wrong with my plane on an evening in France in September 1940 as I was flying over Fort d'Orléans from Alcambari RAF. North of Huntingdon. I was sent to drop supplies to a British military base, Fort d'Orléans, in the middle of France. It was an eerie night. A cloudless sky exposing the full moon which illuminated the surrounding trees and roads. Not a sign of life anywhere, no birds in the sky, no cars on the road. There was literally nothing. But of course I took no notice of this at the time. And other than the feeling of something ominous in the area, everything was fine. Until it wasn't. It was about 9 o'clock when my engine failed. It had just stopped. I was brought to a sudden panic. And by just straight-up reaction, I hammered my fists into the button that opens the door and I hauled myself out. I felt a sudden jolt of force as the winds of the heights I was at hit me. I pulled open my parachute. I felt a sudden jerk as I suddenly slowed in speed. I relaxed a little, but just as I began to do so, I saw a gun falling above me. It was my Colt M1911. I guess that it fell from the plane, had hit me, and knocked me unconscious. I woke up in the middle of a beach with no sight of the plane. I unstrapped my parachute and began to sit up. I felt an agonizing pain in my head. I look around and notice something unnatural about the beach. It looked like a place where a fairy tale might transpire. The perfect waves crashing against the ground, leaving the mass of white froth behind as the tide went out. And then the sand. Not even a single rock or seashell laid out anywhere to take away from the utter pureness of the sand, other than a strange-looking being, positioned in the middle of the beach. But even besides all that, the feeling of just being there was like I was trespassing where no mortal should go. I felt like I just walked into a tomb, and felt that something dark was in there, lurking, waiting for something to wander in, something unfortunate. Out of curiosity, I began to wander over to the strange entity lying there in the middle of the perfect sand. It looked out of place. From a distance, it looked like a piece of seaweed, but as I got closer, I saw that it was slowly hauling itself towards the water. As I got closer, I started to get a strong foul smell. It was out of place, and it caused me to feel a sudden feeling of unease. As I neared even more, I began to feel sick as the stench of something putrid, the effluvium of something dead and decaying, hit me. I felt like turning back, but to where? This was the only thing besides a small patch of trees that I could see along the unblemished sand. As I advanced even further, I could just about make out what it was. From the distance I was at, it just looked like a red, gruesome thing sprawled out along the beach floor. As I got closer, I slowly began to notice some more horrifying details, but when I got there, I was horrified at the revolting thing laid out in front of me. The utter memory of it is making me squirm. It was roughly 2 foot long and had the bodily shape of a squid, but with about 7 eyes. 7 large, round, bulging eyes staring at me with a merciless look. Its body had blood-red skin with what looked like maggots sticking out of it, wiggling and bubbling, as if trying to escape from this hideous beast. I was just about to walk away when I hear the loudest, most horrible noise I have ever heard in my entire life. It was as if my eardrums were getting torn from the inside by the deafening, strident sound. A sound that does not belong on this planet. A sound that belongs to a deeper, darker universe of which is unknown to man. No living man should ever experience the likes of it. It brought me to my knees, and I was nearly ready to cry. But then I look around me to see multiple patches of sand start separating, revealing the same big black bulgy eyes as the last beast. And even worse, they all start making that noise. I begin to sprint, trying to gain as much distance as possibly from these things. The noise is so horrendous my vision starts to blur, but I still manage to see what looks like a patch of about 10 to 15 trees. I don't know why, but I started to run towards them. I step inside, and the second I do so, the noise begins to stop. No, it stopped instantly, as if they all just decided to die at that second. I rapidly swing myself around to find that there was no beach, just trees. I started running towards where the beach was, but it was gone. I began to panic, and I was about to put my hands to my head and scream, but when I did so, I stopped my hands halfway. I felt a horrible pain in my hands, and when I looked, they looked as if I dug them into a bush full of thorns. But then I blinked, and they were fine. I was terrified, and I was going to sit down and try to figure out if I was going crazy. Am I going insane, or am I inside some dark, twisted dream? Or is this real, and maybe I'm trapped in this island of torture and corruption? Suddenly, something made me feel like I needed to run. Something was wrong, very wrong. I felt the presence of something dark, something that lived long before me, and something that will be long after. It was like the feeling you get when you are on your own in a house, when you get the sudden feeling that something was there. It was like this at an extreme level. Maybe my sixth sense just decided to open or something, I don't know. All I remember was that I felt the sudden urge to run. So I ran. I was tearing through the woods, not knowing what I was running from. But then I heard it. A roar so loud it could have been from a missile landing. I began to run twice as fast, and I could hear something that felt as big as an army tank tearing after me. I was tempted to look back, but I was afraid of what I would see, considering what hideous creatures I have witnessed so far and the strange happenings of this place. To follow along with trees are falling, firing branches at me like bullets. And the unholy cry from hell that this thing was making. I didn't think I would survive. I thought I would be ended after all I've been through in Dunkirk and the blitzes. This would surely be the end of me. But then the noise started becoming more distant, and a peculiar mist started forming around me. After about 10 seconds, the noise from the beast started getting quieter and quieter, as the beast became more distant and distant. Eventually, the monster was gone, but due to the mist, I couldn't see 2 feet in front of me. But I didn't hit any trees as I was running. In fact, it didn't feel like I was even in a forest anymore. I began to hear an echo coming from my footsteps as I began to trundle what felt like a perfectly smooth, polished floor. After a few seconds of walking, the fog begins to clear. I found myself in what looked like a place of worship. It was a large hall. There was polished marble walls with polished marble pillars lining the sides. There was what looked like hieroglyphics engraved into the walls and pillars in what looked like gold. There was a ceiling with an engraving of an octopus-like creature with wings and an otherwise human-like body. When I looked at it, I felt a sudden darkness hit me, so I turned away. Otherwise, it looked like a very plain room. There was a red carpet leading to a sturdy, wooden door. I looked behind me to find a plain wall with no openings. I began to walk towards the door, since there was no other way out of the room. I reached the door and began to push the door, but it wouldn't budge. So I began shouldering it, but it still wouldn't budge. I let my hand slide off the cold, metal handle, and then it opens. It was a pull door. I let out a little giggle at my stupidity. I enter the room to see more red carpet leading up to a throne with something that even the memory brings a darkness upon me. I felt like I saw all the fury that hell could hold. The shock of seeing the creature put me in a trance-like state. I wanted nothing more than to run, but I felt sort of drawn to it. It was as if it had me on strings suspended above my head. It was the feeling that I was a puppet, and he was my master. I saw a creature with a human-like form, but it was far from human. The skin was the same ugly, slimy blood-red skin as the last ones I came across. It had a head that was made up of revolting, swollen, bubbly flesh that looked like blistering boils, ready to bust open, sending a mass of yellow ooze around the room. A mouth with sharp white teeth glistening in the light of the candles that seemed to be suspended in mid-air above our heads, and bulging black eyes that seemed to see more than the human eye could comprehend. The legs were slightly human-like, but looked like they were burned beyond recognition. They were like there were suckers beginning to grow out of it. Its hands were the same, except there were 3 fingers with long, curly black nails that looked like they were made for nothing but pain and laceration. And its stomach had what looked like 12-inch worms, about 15 of them, squirming around the place frantically, as if they were starved for days and hungry for live flesh. Not only were the visuals sickening, but the putrid smell of it was nearly enough to knock somebody out. It was like this otherworldly smell that to this day is embedded in my nose. I was just about to run but when I turned around, I felt a sudden pain in the back of my leg. I looked behind me to see the thing from the throne behind me holding a dagger that was lodged into my leg. I fall to the ground, and when I look back at the beast, I see its stomach opening to reveal an empty darkness centered in his torso. The worms begin to extend and grab a hold of my leg. Then they started to pull me. I blacked out, and when I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. I still relive this memory every night in my dreams. No nightmares. That's all I can remember, Doc. So what do you think? They sit in silence in the therapist's office with only the sound of the doctor's pen scribbling. James begins to speak again. About a week after I was found, I started to get nightmares about these strange beings that I can't describe. And then the vague visions of gore and other things that I wouldn't dare speak of started coming after about 3 weeks after that. It seemed like it was dreams, but it felt so real. I had nightmares and visions for months over and over until one night it seemed like it was speaking to me. The dream was based in the building that I first saw him in. I am kneeling in front of him, but this time, unlike the last, it felt like he was more familiar than before. It was like I knew him. He spoke to me in what sounded like some unknown language, except it couldn't really be called a language, more so a series of strange sounds. But in the dream, I understood what he was saying, but I can't recall now. And now I was beginning to feel drawn to it. Now everything seems clear to me. I know how to fix everything. The doctor speaks well. If everything is so clear, then why are you here? James replies, weren't you the one that put me in that padded cell on my own for weeks and weeks? Didn't you say that I was delusional and that I needed it? As James says this, the doctor begins to hear sirens, people screaming and cars crashing just outside the mental institute. He runs over to the window to see what is going on, and just when he is about to see, he feels a sharp pain in his leg. He falls to the ground and swings around to see James standing above him. James looks down and says, well, doctor, I am just a puppet. It's time to see my master, the doctor screams as he sees James change before him into some strange monster. His last sight was his own blood splattered onto the wall beside him. And just when you think this is just a story, every story has some hidden truth.